Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Haunted America. Today's episode features a ghost story found on Reddit. Today's story is Ghost in the Kitchen. All this plus our thoughts and comments on today's episode of
Haunted America.
Before we get into the episode, if you guys would like to get your hands on some of the same equipment we use when we're out there investigating the paranormal, you guys can check out the links down below to get your hands on some of the same equipment, such as SB7 spirit boxes, REM pods, EVP recorders, all the kind of basic stuff you need to get started in your own investigations.
And don't forget to rate and review. It helps our show.
And email us at hauntedamericapodcast@gmail.com if you have a story that you would like read on the podcast and featured on the next episode of America's Encounters. Let's get right into it. Our story today is called Ghost in the Kitchen, sent in by 7 Earthbound 7.
Not so long ago, I had an experience like no other. Though to this day, I'm happy to admit that I'm grateful when I reflect on this day. I walk with pride as I feel I was lucky to have felt a sense of calm and took on a new sense of understanding. An understanding about myself and the world around me. That being said, I would like to add a bit of background. My life was in shambles, so I gave my dad a call to turn my life around with his help. I was jobless, depressed, thin, and weak. In a nutshell, I was a POS. My dad states that I can come home as means to get back on track. Naturally, what dad says goes. So I was lucky to be back. I was lucky to have been on a comfy couch in a warm house with food and back in touch with our beloved pets. All this sinks in as the night grew later.
Dad and his woman go to bed, in the room with the door closed. I'm left in the living room with the dogs in their kennel. The night was easy, the TV was off, the sounds of being back home were recognizable. I was content. As I sat in the recliner/couch, I intended on drifting off to sleep. Eventually, for I knew was I was safe. Okay, wording again, here we go, Reddit stories. And just overall grateful. The only lights that were on were in the kitchen, on the ceiling fan, which was directly above the kitchen table. This is relevant because as I tried to drift to sleep, I couldn't help but be a little annoyed that they were on. But hey, it's my dad's house, he wanted them on, I guess. So this slight annoyance kept me up until I would shift thoughts. That being said, I occasionally would look at the dog kennel and reflect on the dogs and how I miss them. Our family had 3 black lab miniature pinschers. We named them Ginger, Clover, and Sage. The Spice Girls, as my dad would joke.
They each had their personalities and were unique in their own way, despite looking absolutely the same. Well, anyways, during my zone out stage, something unusual happened. What caught my attention at first was a low growl sourcing from Clover, our smallest Spice Girl. I paid no attention to that at first, assuming they were just growling at each other because someone's leg touched their ear or something stupid. Mind you, all 3 fit in that kennel, but at that time they were a bit smaller. So again, I heard a growl, didn't mind it. Moments later, an even lower groan with a bit of a ruff in there. He keeps putting aha over and over, so I'm trying to skip over those. Aha! Just as when I reacted and said, sush.
Yeah, not shush, sush.
Sush. But what didn't occur to me at the first growl was how unusual it was that either of them growled. In all my years, they never did that, especially when all was calm in the night and everything was kosher.
So the second growl grabbed my attention mainly because I didn't want my dad to wake. So as I reacted to her second growl, I let it slide for another minute. By this time, I was in my head with the question, for what? Why is she growling? I eventually turned my head back to look at her, in case she did it again, only to catch her fixed on something in the kitchen. Normally, either of them would look back at you as a response for looking at them. Aha, again. But on this night, she was locked. So naturally, I found this odd, and so decided to look in the direction she was looking. And this is what gives me chills. I kid you not, there I saw a cloud-like material above the kitchen table below the ceiling light fan. And the ceiling fan was on, moving in its rotation. To this day, I don't understand why I was okay with this. I was not scared. I was anything but. I do remember the feeling of ease, though. Maybe I had forgotten to mention that my mother had passed away in this house, which would explain why he said his dad and his girl. So maybe I forgot to mention that my mother had passed away in this house. So in a weird way, I was inclined many years ago to be open-minded to anything paranormal, especially if it occurred here. And I think that's key. Okay, now back to the dog. The growling persisted as she sat up with her two front legs propped. She was the only pup aware, as the other two paid no mind. That in itself was weird to me, for when only one reacts. They usually all do as a unit.
So as I stay fixed on this cloud, I noticed that it was stationary and somewhat transparent, much like a cloud at first glance. The longer I stared, which was literally all I could do, the more I began to wonder, what in the F was this? I did not freak out and get up, knock on my dad's door, no. I honestly remember just falling asleep shortly after that experience and then nothing after that. And for the record, it still gives me chills, and yes, I told my dad and new mother, though as expected, my dad jokingly said I was crazy, and my mom assured me that it could be my bio mom making her presence known.
She's cool like that. Deep down, I feel that too, and I also feel my dad has accepted and probably experienced some things too, prior to me showing back up in the house. All in all, I've had plenty of experiences with the paranormal before, and well after my mother's passing. It's just difficult to find others who can relate, but here I am sharing this with you all as a means to help myself, I guess. Thanks for reading.
All right.
It definitely feels like it was probably your mother, because most people, when they come into contact with an apparition of sorts and they're staring at it, and it's not like, oh, just a quick glance of something out of the corner of my eye or whatever, like you're actually, I guess, sort of interacting with the spirit, you tend to feel whatever that energy wants to put on you.
Right.
And if you were okay with just looking at it, you didn't feel any sort of weird, tinglings or whatever, he said he felt calm.
Yeah.
That's not the energy of a spirit that wants to manifest fear or anything on you. I would go with exactly what you were thinking, that it's probably your mother.
And the dog's growling at it doesn't mean they're not happy with it. It's just they're seeing something.
Yeah, the dog is acknowledging it.
Yeah.
And, like you said, just because it's growling doesn't mean it's growling at a negative thing. The dog is looking at a ball of
it's a dog.
Smoke looking at something.
What do you want it to do? Get up, wag its tail?
So that's what I would go with this story.
Yeah.
Is that it's probably your mother.
It's a good one.
So thank you guys for joining us for another episode of Haunted America. I am your host, Dalton Taylor.
And I'm Jess Trapasso.
And if you guys would like to get your hands on some of the same paranormal equipment that we use when we're out there in the field, like I said earlier, go down, check the links down below. You can get your hands on a spirit box, REM pod, EVP recorders, all the kind of basic stuff you need to get started. While you're at it, rate and review the podcast. And if you have a story that you would like featured on the next episode of America's Encounters,
email us at hauntedamericapodcast@gmail.com. That's hauntedamericapodcast@gmail.com.
Until then, we'll see you guys on the next episode of
Haunted America.